In this video, we're going to transform an old, abandoned, trash-filled room under the stairs into a stunning gaming room unlike anything you've ever seen. We'll be sharing with you every single detail of the transformation, from the moment we opened the room to cleaning it out, installing insulation, lighting, and the computer until it finally became a fully equipped and truly amazing gaming room. Stay with us until the end of the video because the result will blow your mind. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you enjoy the content so we can keep this going. This is Drew, the same guy who made the legendary swimming pool video before. And he had a huge problem at home because of his kids and his nephews constantly yelling in the living room. Of course, everyone needs a private and quiet space away from all that noise in order to be able to work. Even though this room was very narrow, he decided to turn it into an advanced gaming room, equipped with soundproofing, full lighting, and even an impressive simulator setup. The first thing he did was head to the room and opened it. That closet was stuffed with things he didn't need, which had piled up over the years until they completely filled the space. He started cleaning everything out piece by piece. Some of those items had been sitting there for 4 or 5 years, basically since he first started YouTube. And when he went deeper inside, he even found things from the house dating back to 1990. After finishing the cleanup, he only kept about 5% of the items he pulled out and donated or sold the rest. Now, the closet was finally ready to be transformed from a regular storage space into a dream gaming room. Before doing anything else, he cut out the extra pieces of drywall and removed everything that had to come off the walls. He also took down the chain light fixture and the drywall above it, setting it aside in case it might be useful later. At this point, he started installing extra power outlets. He shut off the electricity first, then tested it with the voltage tester pen to make sure the wires were safe to touch. Once everything was cut, he installed the new outlets along with the switches, an LED light switch, and another switch for the ceiling lamp.
Now that the electrical outlets were ready, he bought 2 bags of safe rock wool insulation, each about 3.5 inches thick. This insulation doesn't block out 100% of the noise, but it cuts down at least 75%. He knew that really loud sounds would still be heard through the insulation, but he installed it anyway to make the room much quieter, in addition to providing some proper soundproofing. Next, he cut the insulation using a utility knife to make the process faster, and after finishing the installation, he cleaned up the entire work area. After that, he brought in a few insulation boards called Sonapan, which are about 2 inches thick. These are manufactured from recycled wood fibers and are usually used under flooring or behind walls to help with sound reduction. He cut them into pieces because he wanted to use them in his basement. Once cut, he placed the boards under the lower part of the stairs to reduce the sound of people walking up and down. They could also be installed on the framing or behind drywall, but he didn't do that because the space was very limited and it would have pushed the walls outward by an inch or two. Still, that's a good option for anyone who wants much better soundproofing. Afterward, he reattached the drywall panel to the ceiling, filled in the screw holes and dents with joint compound, and then placed a circular tape on the spot where he planned to cut. He opened the circle using a multi-purpose knife and installed a recessed light fixture. The light is controlled by the switch inside the doorway. This bulb had been left over from his old house and actually had 2 functions. It worked as a regular light, but if turned off for 2 seconds and then switched back on, it would activate a calming, soft glow mode, which was a great bonus. He also had some leftover cedar wood planks from his old house, each about 8 inches wide. To attach the panels together, he used the tongue and groove method, which means fitting one piece into the other and pressing them together until they lock in place. That way, the panels were secured, and he mentioned that he had just enough of them to completely finish the basement walls.
After that, he bought a can of paint and applied just 1 coat over the panels.
The main idea was to cover the tongue and groove joints since the panels were made of solid wood and would naturally shift a little with seasonal changes and humidity. If he hadn't painted the panels before installing them, those shifts would have constantly exposed unpainted spots. So he made sure to paint all the panels thoroughly, finishing the entire surface. He was using these wood panels because they were leftovers he already had, but normally he would just use drywall or gypsum board, which is cheaper and serves almost the same purpose. Then he went back to the basement and carefully took as many precise measurements as possible to cut multiple panels at once, instead of going up and down the stairs for each individual piece. He quickly cut them using his miter saw, but mentioned that if someone doesn't have one, they could easily mark a straight cut line with a framing square and then cut it with a circular saw. The circular saw he was using was actually one of the cheapest models available, but it still got the job done very well. Now he was ready to start installing the shiplap. The tools he used were a small level and a brad nailer. The nail gun worked perfectly, and he started attaching all the panels one by one. He kept going up and down to bring the panels from upstairs and installed them across the whole room. The process was pretty straightforward. He aligned each panel with the previous one, checked that it was level, and then nailed it along the bottom and edges of each stud. As he worked upward, he continued nailing only along the edges. Whenever he needed to cut around outlets or anything else, he marked the cut lines with an angle square and then cut them with his power saw. These cuts didn't produce much dust, so he was able to work inside the basement and just sweep up afterward. The shiplap system automatically hid the nails once the next panel was installed above the edge, which made the final look really clean and seamless. After finishing the installation of all the panels, the room's appearance was already looking absolutely amazing. Then he brought out some white putty and filled in any gaps or nail holes that he knew wouldn't be covered by the trim. At this point, the room was ready for its final coat of paint. He kept working until he had painted the entire room with a second coat. After that, he started building the desk that would go inside the room. He used leftover 2x4 lumber from his old house construction and began by cutting several pieces to size with his saw. The desk design included drawers that would slide out from the front, so he started cutting the drawer pieces as well. Then he began assembling the 4 sides of each section, fastening them together with very small nails first, and then going back over them with larger screws for added strength. To make the desk even sturdier, he added some extra wooden supports. These weren't only for reinforcement, but also to hold the lower drawer panels in place. Once the desk was set up inside the room, he would be able to join the 2 desks together, effectively creating one large desk. Next, he cut thinner pieces of wood to build the drawers and attached finished wood trim to the drawer edges so that the exposed sides would have a clean, polished look. After that, he assembled the 4 sides of each drawer, finishing all of them completely. Now came the hardest part: opening up the exterior wall so the drawers could slide outward through the desk. The first step was to measure carefully with a tape measure and then use a laser level to make sure the cut line was perfectly straight. He marked the area with a pencil, then used a long drill bit to drill through each corner, transferring the corner points to the outside wall so he could take additional measurements. To cut the marked section, he used a saw that allowed him to make precise cuts from the inside without damaging the drywall. He successfully created 3 drawer openings. Afterward, he sanded down the rough edges and vacuumed up all the dust that had fallen from the wall. At this point, he was ready to install the drawers. He built the desk to match the exact dimensions of the room so that the drawers would sit flush against the wall, without requiring any modifications to the wall itself. To achieve this, he ordered extra long drawer slides from Amazon, each 36 inches long.
He mounted the slides onto the desk frame, then attached the other part of the slide to the drawers and slid them into place. This setup made use of the space under the desk while keeping it accessible from the hallway instead of inside the room. This feature would be especially useful for him later on. Next, he began making the drawer fronts. He had a piece of MDF that was 2 inches thick, and in this video, he chose to use MDF exclusively for the drawer faces because it's cheap and easy to work with. Then he cut a 1/4-inch MDF sheet into strips using the miter saw. At this point, he had a 1/4-inch support panel for the drawer face. He glued the strips onto the panel with wood glue, attaching them around the edges to create a shaker-style drawer front. He also used a few small nails to hold the strips in place while the glue dried. After that, he gave the drawer fronts an initial sanding with his sander, then measured the final dimensions, trimmed off the excess, and sanded them once again for a smooth finish. With that done, the drawer fronts were ready to be painted. Each one cost him only about $3 to $4 and took around 1 to 2 hours to make. He applied a coat of primer to all of them, followed immediately by a coat of paint. Once they dried, he installed the drawer fronts onto the drawers and added pull handles. Now the drawers were completely finished and fully functional. After that, he ordered a modern glass door to replace the old wooden one. This new door was meant to make the room feel less cramped and more open once you were inside. He removed the hinges from the old door, and since the new door was the exact same size, it fit perfectly into the doorway without any modifications. Before installing it, he laid the door flat to prepare it. Using a router tool, he cut out the spaces for the hinges, then created an opening for the door handle, and finally routed a deeper recess for fitting the door lock mechanism.
While cutting, he accidentally injured his hand, and it took quite some time for him to recover. Once he healed, he got back to finishing the work on the door lock. He had to use the same tool that had caused the injury, but this time he managed to cut the slots successfully without any further problems. Afterward, he applied 2 coats of black satin paint to the door. Once the paint dried, he peeled off the protective tape that the manufacturer had placed over the glass to make painting easier. With that, the door was ready for installation. He carried it down to the basement where the room was and immediately installed it. Once the door was in place, he moved on to the flooring. This flooring was a fairly inexpensive type and very easy to install. He cut all the pieces to the same length using a circular saw, doing all the cuts outside to reduce dust inside the room. Then, he brought them downstairs and laid them in place. The installation didn't require anything complicated. He just clicked the planks together and the floor was set. At this stage, the room was nearly complete, and the next step was to build the desktop. There were many ways he could have done this, but he decided to use leftover materials he already had on hand. He had a 3/4-inch plywood sheet, so he measured the room's width and cut the piece precisely to fit using his saw. To add thickness to the front edge, he glued on an extra piece of scrap wood he had lying around, and left it clamped for about an hour to dry. Once the glue had set, he sanded it carefully, then rounded off the top edge with a sander to make it more comfortable to use. For finishing, he applied Rubio Monocoat oil, which is a 2-part oil that you mix together and then spray onto the wood. He spread it evenly using a white applicator sponge, let it sit for a few minutes, and then wiped off the excess. With that, the desktop surface was finished. Finally, he installed it inside the gaming room, adjusting it until it fit perfectly in place. He secured it with screws and added 2 L-shaped brackets underneath to support the overhanging edge.
He had some leftover wall panels, so he cut them to size and placed them on the corners. The next step was to set up the computer and lighting on the desk. Since the space was very small and would heat up quickly, he bought an exhaust fan to refresh the airflow. He mounted it on the wall that connects to the outer hallway, and after a bit of work, the installation was finally complete.
When he switched it on, it turned out to be very powerful because it worked with a thermostat. That meant he could set the desired temperature, and if the room's temperature went above that number, the fan would automatically activate to bring in fresh air. Once the room cooled down enough, the fan would turn off by itself. To make sure the fan blended in with the rest of the room, he painted it in the same color as the wall, both inside and outside. Next, it was time to set up the electronics. The first item was an LED strip called Govee LED, which is designed as a continuous neon-like strip. It doesn't heat up while running, and the colors are vivid and striking. He installed the LEDs around the entire edge of the desk. These strips come with adhesive backing, so all he had to do was peel and stick them into place. For a small price, just these 2 strips completely transformed the atmosphere of the room. He could also control the colors through a phone app with multiple modes and effects to choose from. Now came the centerpiece, the computer, which the entire room had been built around. He placed the PC on the side at the end of the desk to save space. For the monitor, he bought a 34-inch curved screen, which was just slightly narrower than the room's width. He mounted it on the wall using hydraulic arms to free up as much desk space as possible. The mount was great because it allowed the monitor to move up, sideways, and in different directions with ease. Finally, he powered on the system, connected a mouse and keyboard, and added a device that syncs the room's lighting with the colors displayed on the monitor. This way, the LED strips reflected whatever was happening on the screen, creating an even more immersive gaming experience.
The kit also came with 2 additional LED pieces designed to sit on the desk. He went back to the room to install them, connected them to the computer, and configured the settings so they would sync with the colors on the screen. When he played a video, the effect was incredible. The technology instantly changed the room's colors to match what was appearing on the monitor. It was truly stunning. As a finishing touch, he commissioned an artist to create his logo in the form of LED lighting, which would serve as the final decorative element for the entire room. Once everything was installed, he tried out the gaming room for the first time and said this project was one of the most enjoyable and rewarding builds he had ever worked on. The motion simulator chair added an extra level of fun to the gaming experience, making him feel more immersed and responsive during gameplay. And just like that, Drew transformed the old abandoned basement into a fully functional gaming room, complete with a powerful computer, immersive lighting, and climate control. That wraps up today's episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your ideas for future videos in the comments.